I'm the founder and executive director for Child Mothers Initiative Uganda. And we currently run 2 projects. One is the bead project, where we do jewelry from paper, clutches, handbags, earrings, baskets. And then the other is the Smart Agriculture project, where we're doing a lot of crop production using environmentally friendly approach. Initially, we were doing production and sale marketing just within Uganda, but the fellowship has opened this other door that today we are in 4 different countries. We sell in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It is one of the fellows that I met at the University of Nebraska, who manages also an organization called FEM 360. So she's doing a lot of marketing for our products in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We have another fellow in Guinea. We sell our products in Guinea. Another fellow that I met from Nigeria connected me to someone else who is a journalist but owns a company, a magazine, an online magazine company. So they're able to run our projects. We've gone international. It's no longer just about Uganda and my region, but people get to know about what you're doing here.
Hi, everyone. All right, we're going to do a quick little exercise. Are you ready? Okay. When I say Yali, you say leaders. Yali.
Leaders.
Yali.
Leaders.
All right. You guys are ready. We want the energy to be all the way up. Well, my name is Rahma Wright, and I'm the founder of Shea, and we are a social impact business I started after serving in the Peace Corps. And I'm also Ghanaian American. Yes, Ghana Jollof. And what
Nigerians.
Right. And what my company does is we help women in small rural villages bring high quality Shea products to the US market. And I am really excited to be here with you this afternoon. How is your trip going so far? Okay, wait a minute. I need a lot more energy. How? You guys are Yali leaders, Mandela Fellows. How is your trip going so far? All right. That's exactly what I want to get from you guys. Well, we have a really exciting panel for you this afternoon. You're in for a special treat. We're talking about trade and prosperity between the US and Africa. Who here is trying to make some money? Okay, everyone's hands should be going up. Exactly. Well, we have been blessed with a group of panelists who have decades of years experience in trade and development on the continent. And to my left, your right, I have Rosa Whitaker, the CEO of the Whitaker Group. Jack Leslie, Chairman of Weber Shandwick and Board Director of the U.S. African Development Foundation. Laura Lane, President of Global Public Affairs at UPS. Lisa Schroeder, Global Director of Trade and Investment Policy at Dow. And then Vital Sunuvu, CEO of Exportunity, and he is also a 2014 fellow. Woo! So we're going to start off by just hearing a little bit about everyone's background, the company that they're representing. Give us a sense of your story and how you got to be where you are today.
Well, let me just say I've been engaged in Africa for more than 30 years. And so it started many years ago out of a call and a passion for people, out of an intellectual curiosity about things like how do we empower people economically, and that led to me moving to Zimbabwe in 1984. and let me just say that my career path has been in the Foreign Service as a career diplomat serving in Africa, and in fact, Laura, that's where Laura and I met. So you see, there's life after diplomacy. And I from there moved to work on Capitol Hill, working on legislation. I went there specifically to develop legislation to work on the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which 5 of us came together to do, and moved from there to the Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for Africa, and from there to starting my own company, the Whitaker Group, in 2003, with the sole purpose of expanding investments, private sector capital, and investments in Africa.
That's amazing.
Great.
Jack?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me here. I've been to these summits before. I have to tell you, when it gets hot in Washington, we know the Mandela Washington Fellows are not far away, and it's always a great week. I'm sure you're probably sorry to see it. I guess it ends tonight, or this part of it ends tonight. So, I'm wearing 2 hats here, as you kind of indicated, and I like to think of it as my day job and my night job. My day job is chairman of Weber Shandwick, which is a global public relations and public affairs firm. We have over 90 offices around the world. Not enough yet in Africa, I might add. We do, for those of you, anyone here from Nairobi, we do have an office in Nairobi and in Johannesburg, and we need to be in many more places. And then my passion and my night job is as chairman of the board of USADF, the African Development Foundation, which hopefully most of you have heard of. I'm told, by the way, that there are about 700 of you, I guess, who are here, that we hope 40 of you will get funding from USADF, up to $50,000.
Ooh.
See C.D. Glenn, if he's somewhere around. I'm gonna sick them all on you rather than on me at the end of the program. ADF, for those of you who might not be as familiar, ADF was started back in 1980. Actually, when the legislation was sponsored by Senator Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, who I was working for then, but I have to say I had not heard of ADF. I was doing domestic work for Kennedy at the time. And it came about as a result of a debate that was going on in Washington, which will sound awfully familiar to you because it's the same thing going on today. It's had different names. Today it's called localization, but back then it was whether, the model for development and whether top-down development worked better than bottom-up. Could we have so-called participatory development, really, where we worked at the grassroots? And so Congress said, let's create a small little agency. It's separate from USAID, although I used to chair USAID's board in the last administration, so we work together very closely. But let's take a small agency and mandate by law that all of the money has to go to 100% African-owned enterprise. So we can't give to an implementing agency. It must go to Africans. All of our partners, we're in 20 sub-Saharan African countries. All 20 partners, of course, are Africa, but all of our staff in Africa are Africans. And so we're very much about really listening to the community and listening to what folks feel they need to create jobs. It's all about enterprise development. 70% of our work, which reflects about 70% of Africa's overall economy, is in the agriculture space. So that's about 70% of ours. But we focus on food, we focus on access to power. So we're doing quite a bit with private sector partners like GE and the off-grid energy area, and then on employment, particularly employment for women and youth. So that's our story.
Thank you. Laura?
So my passion for Africa came from my tour of duty in Kigali, Rwanda. I am a first-hand witness to genocide. I saw what happened in that country, and to every Rwandan in the audience, all I can say is I'm sorry we didn't do enough. That is what has inspired me to be a change agent, to be an advocate for all that is possible in every single country in Africa. I left the Foreign Service because of the failure of US policy, because we did not do enough in Rwanda. But I vowed personally that in the entire rest of my career, no matter where I was or what I was doing, I would be a champion for the possible, for everything that could be done in Africa, because I saw what Rwanda did to turn itself around, and its story is simply inspiring. I've been at the I've been at the U.S. Trade Representative's office where I was involved in negotiations like the basic telecom or financial services negotiations and worked with African countries to get them to be a part of those foundational agreements, because you can't make possible all the economic opportunity or all the dreams that all of you have unless you have the basic infrastructure, and that included financial services and basic telecommunications. I then went to the private sector where I was involved with Time Warner telling African stories. I was involved in a lot of the movie productions that were telling the stories about the child soldiers in Sierra Leone, telling the stories so that people would understand what African countries have been through, some of them, and how they'd come out of them stronger and more resilient. I worked at Citigroup in terms of trying to facilitate a lot of the microfinancing that so many entrepreneurs across the sub-Saharan African continent need to be able to have that little bit of capital that sparks the possibility of the bigger, entrepreneurial project that they have in mind. And now I'm at UPS. And let me tell you, it's a pretty powerful place to be working, because what UPS is doing now is we operate across the only 50 countries, not every single country in Africa, but we work through local operators to provide the power of logistics to help connect companies, entrepreneurs with their customers, whether they're just on the other side of a city or all the way around the world. And here's what's really cool about what UPS is doing, and I'm going to share that with you because I hope it inspires you. A lot of people think that all the innovations happen outside of Africa and then they're brought inside. Here's what UPS is doing. We're partnering with amazing companies and countries to bring innovation that then becomes innovation we share with the rest of the world. We are now operating in Rwanda, a drone service that provides medical deliveries anywhere and everywhere across that countryside to be able to deliver the power of health to Rwandans wherever they are. We took that innovation from Rwanda and we took it to Ghana. And guess what? Those two success stories are what are now inspiring us to take that innovation here in the United States. So never believe that it takes an idea outside of your home country to make something go global, because we're innovating right in Africa, in many of the countries that many of you are from, and taking it global. So I am jazzed to be here with all of you, because I know you are entrepreneurs, you're leaders, you're people who have the vision for what is possible, and I believe in your vision, and we're ready to partner with you.
That's amazing.
I have to admit, Laura's one of my greatest friends here in Washington. She's also the hardest act to follow.
You make a great team.
We always do, and it's a great example of where teamwork can really help grow and share this dream across Africa. I will admit, I came late to Africa. I have not worked in the US government. I've always been on the private sector side here in Washington. And it wasn't until I really came to Dow that I was engaged in looking at the business and our strategy. And part of what really helped that, what helped educate me along the way, was that the company was getting much more sophisticated. We've had a presence in Africa for decades, but it's mainly at manufacturing in South Africa and in Egypt, and then a lot of sales and distributor relationships in between. The company, I think, really kind of came of age in the early 2010s, realizing that you need to have boots on the ground, as we call it. We need to be engaged. We need to be part of local communities. And I think what has really helped us better understand more than anything that capacity for innovation, as Laura's describing it, was getting involved with Yeleen. My former CEO came to the 2014, the US-Africa CEO Summit that President Barack Obama hosted. And what was extraordinary, what was striking about that conversation was, I felt like that was really the first time that we as companies were looking at Africa as the business opportunity. Not just CSR, it wasn't a humanitarian conversation, it was, there's really exciting things going on, how do we make sure that we're a part of that? And part of it was Yeleen. We were approached by USAID, and I was lucky enough to be part of that conversation, encouraging the company to take on that early founding role, to be part of one of the corporate sponsors, because I think one of the smartest things the fellowship program has done was look at this as the opportunity to create regional leadership centers, regional learning centers that could bring everybody together not just bringing you guys together as a network and a community, but making sure that we had a home to engage as we visit, as we look to build these markets in Africa. I was lucky enough to speak at the RLC in Joburg last year, and I got to admit, some of the toughest questions I've gotten in a really long time. So we have high expectations for the discussion with you guys here today, clearly. But as a company, it's really helped us understand and look at how we can be part of that value chain. As UPS is building the logistics opportunity across the continent, we're looking to deliver, as you're probably aware, Dow is a material sciences company. It's a very fancy way of saying we produce things like chemicals and plastics, but more importantly, we're looking at how science can be leveraged for innovation. Our goal is to be part of working with African companies, local partners, where we can help provide the right materials and science technology that'll develop the next generation of projects, products, technologies, goods, services, innovation grown in Africa that can lead how we deal with issues around the world. That can be things like waste management programs for plastics, how we leverage plastics to encourage greater food security, energy efficient building and construction materials. There's so many opportunities to take what is current and being developed and applying that to solve real challenges in Africa. We want to be part of that because we feel that we are part of that community. From engaging with Yeleen from our offices across the continent now, it's about growth, and that's inspiring. So we're honored and thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Well, I'm really impressed by all my predecessors. So about me, what to know. At 6, I was victim of a medical error. I had an injection that was supposed to heal malaria, but actually almost paralyzed my left leg. So growing up, I literally grew up at a hospital, from 6 to 12. But I think that was an opportunity because it got me to keep reading books. I was reading a lot of comics. And I ended up believing that I could make flying cars. And I actually did believe it, and I actually went to college and started studying electronics. I was burning plastics, a lot of plastics, a lot of machines at home. My mom thought I was going to burn the house. I almost did once, but but the fact that I was African and that I had this condition made everybody believe that I couldn't do it. And everybody was like, no, stop dreaming. They were asking me, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I want to make flying cars. And I said, no, but okay, what do you really want to do? I said, flying cars. And when I was in college, there was this lady who walked into our classroom and said she wanted to organize a trade show to discover innovations made in the country. And I was excited. I said, finally, I can meet my people. I can meet all the people who are maybe crazy like me. It was fantastic because we were in college and we started traveling across the country. And I saw amazing innovations. People doing amazing fabrics, inventing new ways of making the fabric, I remember this guy who invented a new type of generator. And my question was, as an IT engineer, I was asking myself, how can I help these people? It took us 2 years to organize a trade show. It was in 2010. We were so happy to organize this big trade show, a lot of innovators from 7 countries in Africa. And I was walking towards one of them, and I was satisfied. And I asked one lady, I remember, she was selling fabrics, and I asked her, was this useful for you? And she said, no. I said, how come? This is big, this is beautiful, a lot of people are here. She said, no, because those people who can really buy, those who can really make a real purchase that can change my life, are not here. A lot of people come and say they're interested, but what we need is to show what we do to the world. And that really had a profound impact on me, and really, I didn't know it would take me 10 years. I'm still on it right now. But my question was, how do I help this lady? And my graduation subject 10 years ago, in 2010, was how to build a platform that could help innovators and producers from Africa get access to market, not only domestic market, but globally. And that's how Exportunity started. I was fortunate enough to be selected for Yeleen in 2014. I was in UT Austin, for Hook 'em Horn, for those who were there. And Austin was fantastic. I got to understand, just to see how much people wanted to know about Africa. Were willing to actually pay for things made in Africa. The diaspora, and also people who didn't know anything about Africa before. And that really encouraged me. But The reality is that at that time during YALI, we were still in a position in Africa where PayPal blacklisted most of the sub-Saharan African countries. Payments go out but don't go in. Logistics is a nightmare. It's more expensive to ship from Cotonou, my city, to Lagos, Nigeria. It's more expensive to ship within Africa than to ship from China to Cotonou, which is totally ludicrous. But at the age where we have AGOA, and many of the companies that benefited from AGOA were BMW, because they were shipping from South Africa. And when African SMEs and American SMEs could not really connect, and where the African Free Trade Agreement was recently voted, I think this is the best time for us to talk about trade in Africa. I think it's the most important moment for Americans to talk with Africans about trade. And I'm really happy to be on that panel to talk about it.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Power panel. Man.
I know.
Panel.
I told you you were
Wow.
in for a treat. So both Laura and Jack talked about the importance of engaging at the policy level and how policy can be a driver to really create open doors and opportunity for investments and trade. Rosa, you are the queen of AGOA, and you were there at the very beginning. Can you walk us through that journey of creating a trade policy that continues to impact the lives of millions of people on the continent?
Let me just say that it usually starts with a burden. And the burden started when I was working in government, and I was in the Foreign Service, and it was during the birth of the World Trade Organization. So there was a lot of discussion about trade, investment, and then there were those of us who wondered, where does Africa fit into all of this? And I never forget, I got this démarche when I was working in Cote d'Ivoire at the American Embassy, and basically my assignment was to convince the government of Cote d'Ivoire to sign on to the WTO. And what I realized in having those discussions, that they had the better argument on the Ivorian government side. They said, trade does not work for us. And they cited all of the reasons why trade wasn't working. They convinced me that trade, according to the way it was done, was actually making Africans poorer. And so that created a burden. And I said, you know, we have an aid policy towards Africa, but we don't have a trade policy. And we had a trade policy for every region of the world except Africa. In the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, which is part of the Executive Office of the President, there was an assistant U.S. Trade Representative for every region of the world except Africa. And that's because, according to the U.S. policy prism, at that time, African countries were beggars, charity, befitting of charity, but we had nothing in our policy that would convey U.S. support for or recognition of Africa as trading partners or in place for investments. So we had a big task. And so one of the first things that you can do if you're looking at changing policy, and Policy Foundation is very important for change. I've seen very little change that's sustainable without a change in policy. We found it like minds. And so there were about 5 of us that we said, we're going to create a trade policy towards Africa. And I recognized that the location is important. I could not do that from the Foreign Service. And so that's when I worked and got a transfer from the Foreign Service to the Congress. And I was very selective about what congressperson I needed to work for. So when you talk about policy change, you got to find like minds, determine who you need and where you need to be. And so with that, we started 5 of us. And then we got 5 other people from the continent, and we started drafting America's first trade policy towards Africa, which is the African Growth and Opportunity Act. It was hard. Big things are hard. Yeah. And Laura, as a trade person, you may remember the members of Congress told us dead on arrival. Everybody told us dead on arrival. They said it's a pipe dream. Even the people who were going to benefit from it didn't believe we could do it. We got fought from the left. We got fought from the right. A lot of NGOs came out against it. Labor unions came out against it. Some of the businesses didn't believe it could happen. But to make a long story short, we never lost the faith because we knew we were doing the right thing. We had a missionary zeal about it because we knew that this would create jobs in Africa today. As of the most recent statistics, that AGOA was responsible for last year almost $13 billion in exports from Africa, and about almost 1.4 million jobs and 100,000 American jobs. And we had to really fight those protectionists in America that didn't want textile and garments coming from Africa to the US. So I will just say this, for those of you who want to create change in your countries, understand that you represent the majority. 60% of the population in Africa is 25 and under. Yes. And so you should not believe that you have to accept the status quo. Do not accept that you cannot do it. Do not think or believe that there's any force that's so big that you cannot overcome it if you're on the right side of an issue. And I just want to ask the audience a question, and I want you to be very, very honest with me about this. How many of you in your country, how many of you are registered to vote in your country? Okay, now, that represents more than I usually, probably because it's Yeleen. But let me tell you, usually,
a little self-selection.
yeah, you know, usually, but we wanted to say it can start with that. You are the majority, and you can come together. When I was your age, you had to have so much money. In Nigeria at the time when I was young, and that's many years ago, because I'll be 60 next year. So okay. You can imagine that you needed $500 million to try to run for anything in Nigeria. But now with the power of technology, social media, UPS ability to move things around, you can do it. And the last thing I will say is that someone told me, and I think about him because he's like a brother, and when I was living in Cote d'Ivoire, Tijan Thiam, who is now the CEO of Credit Suisse, the only African who's ever made it up there. He said, he knew about my passion for Africa. He said, the hardest thing is not to get discouraged. And that is the advice I would give to you. Just don't get discouraged.
Are you taking notes? All these gems? Okay. Jack, I want to turn to you and talk a little bit about USADF's investment in youth in Africa. You talked a little bit about it, but why is it so important for the US government to invest in Africa? And invest in youth in Africa, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for us to invest in Africa, period. But, you know, when you look at what probably, well, not even probably, what undeniably is Africa's greatest challenge and opportunity, it's what Rosa just mentioned in terms of you all and young people. That is, you got 10 million Africans coming into the labor market every year. Wow. You know, by 2035, there'll be more young people in the labor market coming in that year than the rest of the world combined. It's a huge challenge, obviously, to get those folks employed. Those 10 million that are coming into the labor market this year, 60% right now are unemployed. So from just having nothing to do with economic development, but the stable societies, we have to figure out how to do this. But it looked at positively, which is the way I'd prefer to look at it, it's just an amazing opportunity because this is the workforce of the world that we're talking about. So I think the United States has a self-interest in this, not only because it's smart to have the rest of the world rising rather than having problems, but because when you talk to, I don't know, we have like 2/3 of the Fortune 50 companies as clients. I'm in the marketing business. They've saturated a lot of, as you know, Western markets. They're looking for, the Wall Street is insisting that they show growth, and they're looking for where those markets are for the next growth. And American companies, you know, Lisa, you mentioned the 2014 CEO Summit, and I absolutely agree with you. You know, it started to really open companies' minds up to the fact that there were markets there. Europe, I think we kind of oftentimes ceded Africa to some European business interests because of all the historical ties. And then this town loves to talk about China and everything China's doing in Africa. But the US, you know, if it wants to show growth in major markets that we right now in like technology and finance and others that we have strong global positions, then we have to be involved in Africa. The other thing is that, and Laura is much more of an expert than I am, in terms of global supply chains. It's not like it was, you know, the old days you could use import substitution models in trade. We used in the United States an import substitution model to get to where we are. We stopped this trade so that we could build up our own industries. And so I'm somewhat sympathetic to developing countries that say, wait a minute, you know, you can't just use us to extract our minerals and not allow us to develop. And we have to find a balanced way of doing that. But it is different than it was at the turn of the last century. You know, we now have these global supply chains where Africa can play a very, very meaningful role in making the whole global economic system run well. And that's going to take education, and it's going to take jobs and skill training. And that's what ADF, to come back to your question, our involvement really has been in working with both young entrepreneurs and giving them opportunity. By the way, there was some research I saw a couple years ago, and I'm sorry I don't remember who did the research, but I think it was someone credible. They went around the world and they interviewed young people to gauge their level of entrepreneurism. And they did it on a number of measures, the most important one being how risk adverse were they. And everyone, of course, in the United States, we love to think we're the entrepreneurs of the world. Well, actually, Africans ranked significantly higher in this study on entrepreneurism than did American young people. A much higher risk tolerance, and to your point earlier, a willingness to be much more creative about looking for, you know, solutions to problems in their markets. So if we can at ADF, even though we're doing it at a very, very small level, if we can help harness that entrepreneurial spirit, if we can do the early, I mean, as you may know, and it's the 40 grants we'll give to the Mandela Washington Fellows, it's the early stage enterprise. They're only up to $50,000. That's a lot to start something. But,
I'll take it.
Yeah, but what we do is we help de-risk. In other words, we help entrepreneurs take that first step, prove the concept, and then get to a point where they can get access to finance from others at a larger level. And that's what people need. They need that first shot at being able to prove that their concept works, and that's what we're hoping to do at USADF.
Yeah. Laura, I want you to just talk a little bit about what Jack was saying in terms of, you know, supply chain. And so Laura and Lisa and I, we are all part of the Doing Business in Africa Advisory Council. So we've had opportunities to travel.
I was going to tap into that.
Yeah, and you know, I miss the conversations and the presentations that you would do on supply chain and trade facilitation.
So I do have that honor. I was just renamed as chairman of the President's Advisory Council for Doing Business in Africa. And as part of that council, we're looking at three things: how to approach Africa, how to invest in Africa, and how to grow in Africa. And so a lot of the folks, and we partner on this, that are part of this council, are trying to help the U.S. government and the governments that we're partnering with. And here's the key: it's all about partnership. How to develop what Rosa said was the policies, the programs, the processes that enable those creative ideas that are out there in many of these countries, and cultivate them with entrepreneurs in partnership with U.S. companies to help things go across a country or go global. And so many of the key elements go down to the fundamentals of supply chains, right? So when I think about the policies and processes that need to be set up to really facilitate growth for individuals to be able to start businesses and grow businesses, it all comes down to those basic policies and principles about What's the process at the borders? Can you get your inputs in? Can you get the products you make out? Can you leverage digital trade and e-commerce to reach a world beyond your borders? Or maybe just reach someone across town. Can you create the kind of robust supply chains that allow you to connect to customers, to market to customers, to secure payment from customers, to really enable a business to function the way it needs to function? And so as part of the PAC-DBIA, we've been real champions for working with governments to really create that foundational infrastructure to facilitate the growth in African companies, African entrepreneurs. And it begins with smart trade facilitation policies, smart customs policies at the borders, so that trade is simple to do. It doesn't have to be burdensome. There doesn't have to be corruption at the borders to get your stuff moved. It's done seamlessly and electronically in a way that anyone can do it. It's about championing the systems that are needed so that everyone has access to the telecommunications infrastructure that's needed to engage in e-commerce, as well as a financial services infrastructure to facilitate payment services, as well as facilitate the funding for the investment needed and the capital needed to grow an organization. And so we've been real champions for those kinds of basic infrastructures in addition to the hard infrastructure. You know what? If you don't have power, you don't have good road systems, it's going to make it all that more cumbersome to be able to move products or reach new consumers if you don't have that basic infrastructure in place. And PAC-DBIA is really about championing opportunities, again, for partnership, so that there are opportunities for U.S. companies that maybe have some know-how and African entrepreneurs to partner together to develop that hard infrastructure and that soft infrastructure, so that those supply chains work for everyone to go global.
So when it comes to supply chains, sometimes, especially for the demographic here, it can feel like, well, it's so big. Like, how can I participate? What is my role? So what would you say for younger people, for the youth here, which I believe everyone's under the age of 35, what is their role?
I'm under 35. It's a state of mind for me. I'm forever 21.
What is their role, these leaders? What are some of the things that they can do in their communities to make this problem seem so less cumbersome and daunting?
Okay. 3 things. 1, you have to vote. And by the way, if you're not being heard, make your voice heard. You're all leaders. Lead from where you are. If you don't see the candidates that are advocating for change, be the candidate that advocates for change, right? And speaking here to all the men in the audience as well as all the women, you know what makes the world a better place? Is when everything is inclusive and there's no discrimination. I call on all of you to end the discrimination. We are right now championing a women's economic empowerment initiative because it's all about raising up people in communities and helping women have an equal voice with men in partnership to raise everyone out of poverty, to create economic opportunity, to create sustainable communities and thriving countries. But you know what? Discrimination is a principal impediment to inclusive trade because a lot of women are disempowered in order to be a part of the global community. There's been phenomenal studies that have been done that say that if you eliminate the discrimination that women face in terms of the barriers to establishing a business or growing a business, by 2025, if you eliminate those barriers right now, global GDP would grow by $28 trillion. That's 26% by 2025. And all we have to do is make it a level playing field. You know why? Because then everybody has an equal opportunity in terms of having an idea and taking it and growing it and being a part of the global economy. So for all the he for she men in the room, be a champion for that change, because together, we can change the world and make it better. But that requires us having that call to action with governments that say, you know what, fundamental discrimination needs to be eliminated in our country, because that's going to hold us back. Because I know when men and women work together, we can do amazing things, because we hold up half of the sky together, right? So let's work together to make that change. And so I challenge you to go back to your governments and say, first point of order is end the discrimination, change the laws that keep half of our society at home and unable to engage. Third is Rosa said it so well. You know what? Don't ever let anybody tell you you can't or no. That just means you need to find someone else to talk to. That means you need to find another person to lie with. That means you need to say, I got this idea. I need to find champions with me that will fight for this idea. Maybe I need to get smarter about how to establish a business. Seek out workshops that make you smarter. If you're not a financial person, do what you did. Read every book you can. Get smarter about it, so every obstacle in your way, you get over. Every weakness that you think you might have, tell yourself, I will get stronger. And then go out and be the change that you want to see in the world. Because you know what I say to myself every single day? If not me, then who? If not you, why not all of us? Right?
I see people are catching the spirit up in here. We're getting preached at. Lisa, I think this is a really great segue for you to talk about the work that you do as the president of Women in International Trade.
Well, I'm going to take up two topics because I really want to build or echo something that Laura was just saying, and maybe this is the fourth call to action too. Many of you are involved, whether you've created an NGO or a community empowerment program or your own business. You also can help be the voice. You need to be the voice educating your government on what does the economy look like today. We all know politicians can very often be a little bit older. And many of them have a very dated view on how the economy works, right? They're still thinking it's about big projects and big pipes, and if you put enough incentives out there, companies will come and it's all going to be fine. But you've started businesses. You know that's not why you invest. That's not what you think of when you invest. You think of energy security. Do I have enough consistent power supply that I can run the plant or the workshop? What's the tax policy look like? What does the infrastructure policy look like? Can I get what I need, and can I move my product out? Trade facilitation is crucial. But I'll add one more element, the regulatory environment. Obviously in the chemical industry, we're a heavily regulated industry, as we'd expect to be. That's what makes you comfortable with our products being in so many other components. But when you think about where the innovation is coming from, we talk a lot about advanced manufacturing. And when we say that, I know the reaction in the audience, advanced manufacturing is flying cars. It's robots. It's all these bright new technologies, but as far as we're concerned, advanced manufacturing can be the food packaging that means the farmer gets more product to market and makes more money. We talked about women's empowerment. It's shoes that don't kill your feet by the end of the day. It's phones that don't die when you drop them in water. Advanced manufacturing to us is how do you use material science to make more resource-efficient manufacturing so we're not draining the resources of the planet, and you turn out with a product that solves real challenges for real people. The more we can do that and to focus on how we educate our politicians on the economy of today so that that policy, as Rosa was saying, actually incentivizes more growth, more investment, more job creation, and more production of real solutions that can be part of the Africa story and Africa's contribution to the rest of the world. And women are a crucial part of that. I really want and appreciate the chance to reference WIT because I think it's one of the models that speaks to what Laura's talking about and how we build a better community to support each other. WIT is a local, here in DC, it's a professional development networking association, entirely voluntary. It's run by women for women. We make up board members. I'm the recent past president. All of our section chairs who plan programs, these are all volunteers who do this because they want to get involved and they want to enable each other. We even have professional development activities where you can do things like learning how to actually use LinkedIn, which I still don't quite understand how to do. All of this, though, comes together under the umbrella of an organization called OWIT, which is the Organization of Women in International Trade. That's a global entity, and I am really proud to say OWIT's national conference last year, or global conference last year, was in Nairobi. We were in Nairobi because there's an amazing group of women in Kenya who created their own chapter and are doing this for each other. So when you've got someone who tells you no, while I would never advocate blowing up the house, I gotta tell you, Herbert H. Dow, my founder and the original starter of my company, he blew up the tool shed 3 times before he got it right. And he could do that because he had a family that said, give it another try. Of course you can. And that's what we all need more of in our life. So if you don't have that kind of an environment or a WIT-type chapter, we're available online. OWIT exists. There's organization chapters in Africa. And creating that community where if you can't find it, make it. WIT itself, and I'm very proud to say, is a 31-year-old organization, was actually one of those groups that started because a bunch of women here in this town were getting together all the time, seeing each other at all the same events, and were standing around, as so very often happens, in someone's kitchen one night and said, we should create a group. 31 years later, we are 700 women, and we just actually won one of the most prestigious trade lighthouse awards that you can get in this town. If you don't find it, build it. If you need the support, go out there and find the people who are going to empower you, because the more we do for each other, the greater the success story is going to be.
Vital, you are doing it. You're building it. You didn't see something in your community and you decided, I'm going to do something about it. And it's something that is not only helping you specifically, but it's helping people get access to markets. And that is, I love that. And I think for your colleagues in the audience, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you've faced and how you've been able to overcome those challenges and not give up and keep going?
Well, thank you so much for this question. That's first, guys, when you get back home, and I'm not bad-mouthing, most of us fellows have a 6-month depression.
Okay.
Because you go back and you have
That's
all
real.
these
He's keeping it real. Yeah.
You saw all these ideas. I'm going to change everything. Fantastic. I saw this amazing startup in Austin, and I'm going to do the same. And then you go home, and home is still home. Things haven't.
It's like you're in a bubble right now, right?
Exactly. I mean, I don't want to burst it. Like, keep it up, keep it. But to come to your question, I came home, and payment solutions didn't work, and we had to create it. I was fortunate enough to be selected for the Tony Lumelu Entrepreneurship Program for the first year, and I needed a payment solution, so I had a chance to ask the question. I told Mr. Lumelu, I want to do business with your bank. Can you introduce me? I want your bank to handle my transactions. He said, fantastic. This is the CEO. So I went down there, and I harassed the poor guy for 6 months. And finally, out of that, we're able to become the first company to receive payments, Visa, MasterCard, and Verve payments in Benin, coming directly to a bank account locally, which was a breakthrough. Because suddenly, someone who's selling someone in Nachtengu can sell the product to anybody in the world. But we were so happy, and we thought that was it. But the other thing was that it's good to receive Visa payments, but we have to disburse those payments to people. We did not want to use mobile banking because it's still too expensive. So we went to the bank, and we said, we want to use our own brand of cards. And we issued this, the export card. It's a card that, first, a prepaid Visa card. We connected it with PayPal. We connected it with mobile money, so it can be loaded by mobile money. And after that, we still had the logistics issue. Because as I was saying, it's so expensive to ship products. But many people, when you talk about shipping, will tend to think about 10 tons of 8 million tons of something. That's for bigger corporations, a ton of something of a casual shipped by an SME can pay a school fee, Nobody really talks about those small shipping volumes, but I think it's very important. So what we did is that we partnered with the National Post of Benin. Many people don't realize, but National Post, many of them in Africa are going bankrupt because nobody sends letters anymore. But they are the oldest institutions in most countries. They have a real estate, and they're very good at shipping. And many people don't know is that they have the lowest rates of shipping. So that's what we partnered with them. So we obtained, with the support of the government of Benin, the cheapest rates for shipping. So suddenly what happens is there's a producer in Benin who receives an order from anywhere in the world can actually go to the nearest post office and just drop the product there, and can ship it. Not saying the National Post was the easiest part, but because you had to explain to a bunch of people who were used to doing everything with paper that we want to digitize the way you handle, the shipping, and it was quite a challenge. But eventually this helped us because we became the largest distribution network in our country with 111 offices right now, thanks to the National Post, and we don't pay for rent, which is beautiful about it. So. But just to conclude on the last part of the challenges, the other thing is when you're on an African platform, I was so obsessed, from my background in engineering, I tend to be too detail-minded. And we built a platform that's in 92 languages, 8 currencies. So you come from anywhere in the world, you can go to Exportunity.net right now. You can see an African product made by an African. Every product you click on, we ask over 80 questions. Any question that you need for international trade, for a customs agent to see before allowing a product was asked. We make sure that every company on our platform is legally registered. So we vet all that. So all that took a lot of time, but today, the biggest, the most daunting task is to get people from all over the world to know that this platform exists, and that you can come there and see African products. We offer online shops for companies that we don't have a logo on it. They have the logo, they can fully customize it, because the goal is it's not about us. Their success make our success. So yeah, just to conclude on that, the challenge is still, how do you get customers from around the world, and especially from the US, to know that there's a place to find African products, good quality and vetted. That's the biggest challenge right now.
Okay. So I think we are going to be heading to Q&A in about 5 minutes. Oh, to now, okay. So everyone who has been listening to this amazing panel, start getting your questions ready. While you're getting that ready, I just want to ask one last question for the panel. Rosa, you talked about this. So you, with 5 people, it basically created a program that didn't change the lives of people for 1 year or 2 years, but for decades. So what you basically said is you need to have the right squad around you.
Yes.
So I want to know about your squads. And it can be, everyone, I would love to answer this question, which is the characteristics of the people around you. Who are the people that, whether it's professional or personal, that you allow in your space to allow you to be successful?
That's a very good question, because what you're talking about is that kind of success prescription. And as business leaders, we talk about that all the time. For one, I think you need, I have the C's. You need character.
Yes.
Without character, and that goes with the integrity and the ability to get the desire to do the right thing. You need competence. And it's very competitive out here. So you have to be competent. That means you are learning all the time. And none of us have the full package. We're working on it. So you really have to love reading, have that intellectual curiosity. And you have to have courage. That means you're not easily daunted. So you don't stop. When you look at the people who rise to the top, those are the overcomers. And so those are really, I think that courage, competence, character, and the 4th C is just a commitment. You got to just be committed.
Okay, so those are the people in your squad.
Those are my squad.
Jack?
So I had to take notes because the C thing I like. So I've come up with 2 other C's, which are really important in my business. The first is curious.
That's true.
You know, we want folks, because creativity is another C, I guess we can use that too. But creativity, and essentially my business is a creative business, comes from folks who are curious, who want to explore something new, and from that, they get something that's very engaging. So I'd say curious, and the second thing that's become so much more important in our business, and I think in most businesses, is collaboration.
That's true.
It used to be in our business you could kind of work in silos because you had certain expertise and it was okay. But today, in a kind of digital environment, we, and in a cross-boundary kind of environment, having folks who are, I'll come up with a D, which is diverse, diverse and able to collaborate is very, very important.
So mine are 3 Ps, right? Okay. You got to have passion for what you're doing. Don't waste your time doing something that's only half in your heart. If you believe in it, make that the focus, because it'll give purpose to your life. Second, I would say, is that you have to be positive. You have to surround yourself by positive people. Don't waste your time with people that tell you no and why you can't. Surround yourself with people who say, yes, you can, and I believe in you. And then third is persistence.
That's true.
The reality is there's a lot of enthusiasm out there in the world, but the enthusiasm will only get you to the starting line. It's persistence that gets you to the finish, and then makes you realize, hey, that's not the real finish line. I've got so much longer in my journey, and so you have to be someone that persists in the face of failure, that says, all right, learn from that, and let's keep moving on. And that's how I surround myself with people who never, never, never let me give up. So,
Amen.
Yeah.
I'm going to add, actually, because yes, everything they've said, but I'm going to add a couple more definitions to some of these words, too. When we think about creativity and collaboration, for example, I think that is such a terrific area because there are so many challenges that need to be solved. And there's so many more new ways to go about it. When you think about what you bring to the table and you can help with, think about not just how you're helping yourself, but collaboration is about how you're empowering someone else. Be that change agent. Encourage your friends that no matter what, they can go for that job and you're going to be happy for them. We want to be the group, the generation that's empowering each other to be successful. Because that passion and the persistence you're bringing to solve real challenges, the more we're doing that collectively, the more we're engaging each other so that everybody gets to their full potential. I mean, that's where we're really genuinely going to see things move forward in a much more positive way.
So true.
Well, on the same question, first thing, remember there's only one of you on the planet. And when you die, what do you want people to remember? You know, that's something that really gets in my mind every day. Second thing for me is put love in everything you do, because if you don't love it, you're just going to be miserable. So when I don't love something, I don't do it. Third, have faith. You know, if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough.
Yeah.
To make it scare you, and have faith in it. And third, and last, and gratitude. You know, I have a tattoo right here. It's written gratitude. It's the most important thing that's going to keep you going, because you have to celebrate the smallest victories every day when you go home. Think about what worked. And the fifth, to close on that, is, see, look around you. The guy or the lady right next to you might be your biggest support in the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
See,
On that note,
Good.
I don't.
Guys, this is more than a program. This is going to be your family. So remember to keep in touch. This is your support system. I mean, I'm so privileged to be back here because 5 years ago, I was praying that I could have this chance again. This is your chance. Make it count.
All right. Well, it looks like we have run out of time. My apologies. I blame myself for that. We can't do Q&A, but please, let's give this amazing panel a round of applause.